that there are any fatalities or anything like that. But just looking at this, you can see that, you know, it definitely caught fire, and it looked like there was a few explosions. So again, a huge ball of fire and flames just west of Houston Executive Airport. And again, we're trying to get some more information so we can bring that to you. Mel?
All right, you're getting a much longer view there, Tammy, for the first time. Is this a completely rural area? Now we have a much closer view of that plane, and we can certainly see some of the emergency vehicles there as well. It looks as though at least one part of it is broken off. Is that what you see?
Yeah, so it is a pretty big aircraft, you can see, and you can see where it's split in the middle. Now, luckily, landing, there isn't any homes or anything near this, so that is the good news. You know, looks like definitely wouldn't have hit anybody going down, like any homes or any type of cars, and it looks like there's an old dirt road there that I'm trying to get the address for that. But yeah, when we zoom in closer, that does look like it might be a commercial airline or quite a big aircraft. You know, it's not a Cessna or a smaller aircraft, but we're hearing that there might have been as many as 20 people on board. Let me zoom out for you to see, because I hear that there's quite a few ambulances here, and see if we can see anybody that got off or patients or anything like that, because from what we're hearing so far, you know, 20 people on board, but we're not hearing that there are any fatalities. So hoping everybody was able to get out before that burst in flames. But you can see that dirt road there that leads up to where the plane went, just short of the runway. We don't know if they were taking off or landing. I can zoom out here where you can see the winds are blowing towards the northwest. That's where the smoke is going, and it doesn't look like it's too strong. But again, as I zoom in here, firefighters working fearlessly trying to get the flames out on this big aircraft. And again, I know my pilot has been speaking to air traffic control and other helicopters in here, where I will try to get some more information from him.
Yeah, and we're getting a clearer view, thanks to you guys, that plane literally does look as though it broke in half. You can clearly see, you know, both parts of the plane there, and the fire in the middle. They have been able to get some water on it right now, which is the first time we are really seeing this. Now, we're being told that this plane was registered to a company out of Spring, Texas. We don't know the name of the company at this point, but we are being told that it was registered to them. Again, 987 investments. We're getting that word from my producer now. So that appears to be the name of the company. Again, you can just see, quite literally, DPS is now telling us that there are no fatalities, which is remarkable looking at this plane. So Tammy, as you continue to look at that and sort of fill us in on things, it would be amazing if, as you say, up to 20 people were on board and there are no fatalities as you look at what's left of the hulk of that plane.
Yeah, we're actually talking to several other helicopters up here, and one of them is a PD helicopter. We were trying to listen to them, and again, we were working with our desk to try to confirm those information, but just by looking at the aircraft and them talking about as many as 20 people on board, that is definitely not out of the question. There could be that many people on board that aircraft, because it is a larger airplane. And again, you know, unfortunately, when there is a plane crash, if they can land in a field like this, in fact, my pilot, Dave Allen, is constantly looking outside if we ran into engine failure or we ran into some sort of situation. He always has a place or spot that he could land halfway he had to land. And pilots are trained to do this to make sure that if they do get into trouble that they can land, because the best would be in a grassy area, field like this, where there's no homes or anything like that. And again, I'll zoom out so you can see just how far, you know, the next home. Really, there's really nothing around here. So that is the good news. And I'm trying to find the airport here. I believe it's just west of the airport. But we have quite a few fire departments and police agencies here on scene. You can see all the fire departments and ambulances there. Again, I'm trying to look to see if we have any transports or any people from here. I'm just seeing firefighters at this point and some other vehicles. So I'll go back over to the aircraft, again, working with our desk to figure out exactly what type of airplane this is.
Yeah, but as you indicate, it is a good-sized airplane, whatever it may be. It looks as though the tail has cracked open, and you could actually see kind of inside the plane for a moment there, Tammy, and hard to tell where the front is or how many pieces this plane broke into, but if indeed there were up to 20 people on that plane, it would be absolutely miraculous if everyone survived. Again, we're being told this is a company out of Spring called 987 Investments, and DPS is reporting to us that there are no fatalities on this plane. But we are hearing there's at least one person who was injured, but minor injuries. Once again, just incredible to think about there as you look at the wreckage of that plane. So one person injured, but just a bit, and then obviously the rest of the people, we still don't have a definitive number of people who are on board that plane. Ted Oberg has joined us just a moment ago, and I am assuming, Ted, looking at the smartboard, that you're trying to figure out exactly where they are and what might be going on there.
Yeah, Mel, it's the Houston Executive Airport. I think Tammy was probably talking to you about that. It's a small airport sort of there west of Katy, used by private airplanes like this. And I could, when they pull out, you'll be able to see the runway sort of and I can't orient myself there, but there you see the end of the runway, and we're still not certain whether this plane was leaving or coming into that airport or was making an emergency landing there. But clearly from the extent of the fire and the fireballs that Tammy was talking about seeing, there was an awful lot of fuel on this plane. We do know from online registries it is a 34-year-old plane. It is something akin to what a DC-9 or an MD-87, if you've ever been on those planes, not flown a whole lot in commercial aviation anymore, but if it was, it would fit about 170 people. That gives you a sense of how big this plane is. In most recent airline registries, it is listed as a VIP configuration, meaning it has likely larger seats and far fewer people. In the past, some of the flight trackers have suggested it's taken sports teams, college sports teams from place to place, but obviously no flight plan that we can access as to who was on this plane or where it was headed today. But you are absolutely right. This is an awfully big plane to seat 170 people when configured for a commercial flight, but that's not the case now. This area, as you can see, is incredibly rural, really more in Brookshire than necessarily Katy. And Tammy, I don't know if maybe you or the pilot has any sense of which way planes were taking off or landing from on that runway this morning, whether this was an approach or a takeoff. Is there any sense from you guys about where the wind is going this morning and how that might have affected whether this was a takeoff or a landing, given that the plane is there?
Yeah, Ted, actually it's a little bit hard to talk to my pilot right now because he's busy talking to other multiple helicopters. But you were talking about the runway, and I'm going to zoom out and show you how close this crash was to the Houston Executive Airport. You can see the runway off to the left. So, you know, could be on landing or on takeoff, but how close it was, and just fortunate again, ended up crashing in that grassy area. And I'm trying to look to see if there's some sort of triage right here at the dirt road. I'm trying to see if, you know, where the patients are possibly being treated. And again, I was hearing all that chatter from one of the PD helicopters up here, and we're hoping, you know, that is correct, that they were treating multiple people down here. Again, I'm trying to find out to see if we can see where those people are, but I do not see any sort of triage on this side. But you are correct on how big that aircraft is. I know it could seat quite a few people. And we were just hearing, again, this is just from chatter, that they were saying that there was 19 people and 3 crew members aboard. That is what I was hearing from one of the other helicopters, and it sounded like you know, that some of them had made it, you know, off the airplane before it crashed. And again, I'm trying to find out where those people would have been or injured or hurt, or where they're treating them. Obviously, though, like you mentioned, with this much fuel on board, that's why we saw those explosions and huge ball of fire from quite a distance away. You know, so they're fighting that, and you see all that white foam that they're putting on top, you know, of the aircraft to help snuff it out. But again, it's probably going to take some time because there was, you know, depending upon whether they were landing or leaving, a lot of fuel on board, which looks like there's, you know, quite a bit. And again, in between these reports, when you're talking, I'm trying to listen to air traffic control as well as these other multiple helicopters up here that are you know, giving information and reporting to each other what's going on.
Well, and Tammy, thanks so much. As you show us that picture there of that row of ambulances and the like, the good news, I guess, is that you don't see anybody running around. There's no kind of frantic pace to it. People seem fairly calm and relaxed. We're hearing there were 21 people on board at this point, and one minor injury, as we mentioned. No fatalities, one minor injury.
Hard to believe, isn't that?
Yeah, it really is as you look at that plane.
And the other thing, that one of the shots that Tammy just had was a water tank that they had to bring, the fire departments out there had to bring water to the site. There's obviously nothing there, and they're trying to get as much water as they can in the hope that, you know, thankfully we've had a little bit of rain so that grass may not catch on fire. Could you imagine if it was a little bit drier, this would be a far worse situation?
Well, as you get this closer shot, you can really see, you know, that tail just completely broken off from the rest of the plane, and it looks like much of it has disintegrated at this point. And even with all that water and foam, Ted, that black smoke continues to pour out. You can just see the sides of those flames, and they haven't been able really to knock them down very much. But just the idea that you would have 21 people on board this plane and everybody more or less walk away is just mind-blowing. It's miraculous.
So on the left there, Mel, those are pictures from earlier today. One still there, if you can see that massive explosion, the smoke rising there. The one on the right is live SkyEye. But the flames appear to be centered right where the wings were, which makes sense as that's where the large fuel tanks are.
Exactly.
But it will keep going. The other thing you can see there, Tammy, if you just pan to the right, you can see this plane dragged its tail for quite some time, probably 50, 60 yards there at least. You can see that large divot there, which certainly, and it looks like the tail is sort of tilted up, which may have sort of precipitated some of the breakup of that plane there. But you can see they came in hard there. It is amazing if no one is seriously hurt on this plane crash, given what we're seeing there, both the fire and the disintegration of the plane.
I do want to say, since it's 11 o'clock right now, if you were just joining us for Eyewitness News at 11, we are covering breaking news at this point. As you can see there on your screen, this huge plane that has crashed in Waller County, very close to Houston Executive Airport. You can see the runway just across the way from where this plane is. What we're hearing is there were 21 people on board. Everyone survived. One person apparently with minor injuries. And we do know that this plane belonged to a company called 987 Investments out of Spring, Texas. But again, the DPS is reporting, and police, that everyone survived this plane crash, which is just absolutely astounding as you look at the pictures there. As Ted mentioned, you can see the plane's tail broke off almost in half there, just broke off cleanly. And they continue to try to put water and foam on top of this blaze. At this point, it just continues to blaze away. Ted, as you look at that plane, what we're hearing is, what, 34-year-old plane, you called it, and perhaps a DC-9. What was the other model it might be?
I think it's a McDonnell Douglas 87. It's similar to a DC-9. We are now learning from online sources that it was taking off from the Houston Executive Airport with the 22 people on board, which explains why there is such a heavy fuel load on board, which is, it would explain sort of why now for probably the better part of an hour it's been burning there. And so if it was configured with full seats, you know, to cram passengers in, it would fit 170 people, which is about what a Southwest jet flies. So you can get your head around how big this plane might be. In more recent configurations, it's probably has 20 or 30 or 40 VIP seats, which is likely what it was configured for here, leaving an airport like the Houston Executive Airport. As you can tell, again, if you're just joining us, this is a very rural area west of Katy in Brookshire, really. They call it the Houston Executive Airport, but it is used exclusively by private planes, jets, and so forth for business trips or things like this. And
as you can see there, the front of the plane is just completely gone. It's just quite literally a shell at this point. But clearly the fire has done its damage there as they continue to put foam on there. Tammy, I don't know if you can pull back just a little bit so that we can also see the runway once again, because you'll get a sense of just how incredibly close all of this was. So it looks as though if that plane was taking off, it just didn't even make it into the air.
Didn't make it far,
yeah,
no.
It absolutely did.
It looked like it skidded and just stayed on the ground there. There you can see the end of the runway. The plane configured, if the runway is straight up and down between 6 and 12 on a clock, the plane now sort of off, I think, to about 11 o'clock there, so likely hit the ground and sort of moved to the side as it skidded to a stop there. But it doesn't look like it hit the road at all. Doesn't look like it clipped any of those trees or anything there, but nor does it look like it was, well, and there's some fence posts down.
I'll interject here. It looks like they hit the fence there near that pickup truck. We were basically trying to see if they were taking off or landing. It either would have been a long takeoff there. You can see where it hit the fence and the power lines before it went over the road and crashed.
Wow.
So awfully low at the end of the runway if it hit that fence. Tammy, that fence doesn't look to be extraordinarily high, right? I mean, this is sort of an 8-foot fence like we typically see at the edge of an airport. I mean, nothing exotic there, right?
So I was trying to ask my pilot, because obviously I'm a reporter, I don't have that pilot experience, and again, with all the traffic stuff, he just pointed out that he definitely noticed that it hit that fence, and either said that it had to be, quite a bit of a long takeoff, or short, or a rejected takeoff, he said, which basically a rejected takeoff and hit that power line. So not exactly clear, because again, I'm not a pilot, of what he's
well, it looks
you can
like
actually see the tire tracks going
those
up.
could be tire tracks, sure, that hit, right?
That's almost what it looks like there, Ted. And you talked about the drag on the end of the plane, which means it hit very, very hard.
Yeah.
And you can see that just behind the tail there.
So is it almost spun around then, Tammy?
Yeah, then actually that's what it looks like it did. It spun around because this is the direction, that it was either, coming in, and some.
Oh, wow.
He was going northbound from the airport, and then, something went wrong, and he hit, obviously you can see where he hit that gate in the trees and the power lines where that pickup truck is. And then as they made the collision, because you pointed out that little dent behind the tail, it looks like, probably spun around there in the grass.
Boy, and when you think about it hitting the fence and the top of the trees, how low was it traveling at that point?
Right, 10, 20 feet max,
yeah.
right? And the wheels are on that road.
Right.
And what do you think, Tammy? Maybe a couple hundred yards from the end of the runway to that road there? So
it's
this
very
plane,
short. It's only a couple hundred feet. Like as I pull out here again and get a better picture of where that runway is over the road. So they had to be going, quite low. In order to hit that, or got into a situation or problem, some sort of failure or something, and started going down and was just short of the runway. It's kind of hard to tell. The investigation just beginning, other than we know that they were flying too low to hit that fence again while they were either landing or taking off.
And you're right, now I can see the wheels there in the grass. We weren't able to see that before. But we do want to call everyone's attention once again to just the area around here. It doesn't look as though there's a house for miles or any kind of other building, which is the real blessing in all of this. The fact that they were able to land in a nearly empty field, as you were talking about a few moments ago, Tammy, and how important it is for a pilot to kind of look for his exit route, whatever that may be. But it looks as though it just slammed down so hard that it cracked the plane in half, and then ultimately it burst into flames there as they continue to try to put it out. It looks as though they're gaining a little bit of headway. Is that true? Tammy? I'm not sure if Tammy can hear us.
Based on what we're seeing, right, a lot of the black smoke has started to disappear. Maybe that means that hopefully the fuel has burned itself off. But
there you go. Yeah, look at that. It's almost completely knocked down. I do still see flames there in the middle, but you can see that the plane itself, the hull of the plane is just about gone. Really, the only recognizable part at this point is that tail. But there are some stubborn flames there they're still trying to get out. But as you mentioned, Ted, if it just took off, it was absolutely full of fuel at this point.
And it's hard to tell where people would have come off this plane. Any inflatable stairs or slide likely would have disintegrated in that heat of the fire. But amazing that all 22 people now, according to the sheriff, are okay. One person transported to the hospital with back injuries, we're being told, but amazingly, no serious injuries from this, at least from what we know now. Obviously, that can change as the afternoon progresses, but to think that 22 people were on that plane as it moved down that runway, hit the trees, hit the fence, and landed in that field just a couple hundred yards from the end of the runway, and all 22 people are able to get off so quickly.
Yeah, that's amazing. We're hearing 19 passengers, 3 crew members on board. As you can see here, just a flotilla there of emergency vehicles, all kinds of different vehicles, from fire trucks to ambulances to, I'm sure, county deputies out there. But at this point, you know, the real business at hand is just getting that fire out. It doesn't look as though very many of those ambulances were running hot, so it may be they just sort of treated people at the scene, whatever bumps and bruises they may have, and then transported one person, as you mentioned, because of back injuries. But you can just see there the complete destruction of that plane.
Well, with the exception of that one engine, so the left engine there, where just over the firefighters, charred and burned almost 2/3 of it. The engine on the right there, through the smoke, once the smoke clears a little bit, or the helicopter flies to another location, you'll be able to see that engine that was on the right side of the plane is not burned at all, which is an interesting development, obviously.
Yeah.
The NTSB hasn't called me for my expertise yet, but it is interesting just looking at that. Everything on that plane is burned, with the exception of that engine there on the right side.
On the right side, and the very tail there, the very back of the tail. We're going to take a quick break right now. Tammy Rose, if you can hear me, just wanted to let you know that as well. We're going to take a quick break. We will be right back as we continue to bring you this breaking news. A plane crash in Waller County, very close to the Houston Executive Airport, apparently taking off, and something terrible happened in the meantime. 22 people all survived, only one with minor injuries. We'll be right back. Yeah. take off, we understand at this point, from Houston Executive Airport. And we're going to ask Tammy Rose and the pilot that she's with to kind of pull out so we can see the area leading up to the runway. Thank you so much there, Tammy. And what we're discovering, we've just been talking to our news director, Keaton Fox, and he has much better eyes than we do. As you look here, you can actually see the tire tracks. It looks as though it never got off the ground, or if it did, just barely.
Yeah, Tammy, go back to the end of the runway if you could, because Mel, I think you.
There you go.
Yeah.
And you can actually see those two lines there before.
And then if you follow this off the end of the runway, so the plane would have been traveling the same direction as the camera is now. And watch in the grass, it's hard to tell and certainly not definitive, but you can see tire tracks there. There'd be no reason to have such deep tire tracks in that road at the end of the runway. And then where that truck is stopped, it appears there continue to be tire tracks. And then, Mel, as it approaches the fence, you can see the tire tracks and the divots get deeper.
That's exactly right. You can also see it knock down the tops of some of those trees and again continue to travel. And as you pointed out, Ted, a little while ago, if we get to the actual site where the fire is going on right now, you can see behind the tail a very, very deep rut there, as though the tail just sort of dragged along. And it also looks as though it flipped around. I think you pointed that out just a couple of moments ago. But it just inconceivable that 22 people, we're told, walked away from this plane crash. It's just really hard to believe. Only one injury that we know of, a back injury. We want to head on out to the site right now, and Bree Berry is there. This is, by the way, off of Morton Road near Houston Executive Airport. Bree, what have you been able to learn since you've been out there?
Obviously, this is all still unfolding around us, so I'll step aside just so you can see what we can see from our vantage point. It's a long gravel road here, pretty much the only road that leads into this area. So it's rural back here, and you can see all the way down at the end of the street. We're standing back for safety reasons. Of course, they've got crews here directing traffic, and a lot of crews showing up, a lot of flashing lights, as you imagine, with these emergency responders. And we know that ABC13, in fact, was just able to speak with the owners of the plane. We know it's J. Allen Kent, who's that agent company who owns the plane. They own Flare Builders. ABC13 spoke with someone at the business, and they said they are aware of the accident and that Mr. Kent was on board, but they said everyone is okay. So still waiting to hear a little more from them. But of course, they're aware of this now, and you're just hearing a lot about what you guys were saying. You know, obviously we can't see the plane from where we're at, but the smoke, you could see it. We were driving all the way in from Southwest Houston, and you could see that smoke miles and miles away. And as you drove in, there were a couple businesses off to the side, and most of them, I could see their employees standing outside, you know, people kind of waving us down, asking, is this a controlled burn? What's going on? And just sort of a recap, we know that all the emergency crews here, we just saw a Fort Bend emergency vehicle pull up with, we know those vehicles have the ability to help a lot of different people. So right now the good news is we're not hearing of any deaths. Waller County Sheriff Troy Guidry said 21 people, were on board, made it out safe. One person was sent to the hospital. I know you all have mentioned that with back injuries. We're not sure the extent of that. But again, what we're hearing is that there are no serious injuries and no deaths. There are some crew members out here who are navigating traffic. We know that they were able to, a few of them, I don't think they saw anything, but heard the plane come down. So, you know, we're still trying to gather this as we're standing out here. And, you know, we're going to hopefully speak to someone in just a little bit. But the smoke, it seems, from where we're at, seemed to have gone down quite a bit. But you can still see crews working here heavily at the end of this street. Melanie?
Bree, thank you so much. And again, we did have a chance to talk to the owner. Bree, that is correct, right? The owner is J. Allen Kent, the registered agent of the company that owns this plane, owns Flare Builders. And the owner was on the plane?
that's what they're confirming with us. We were able to call flare builders, and whoever spoke to us on the phone said that Mr. Kind was on the plane, but they confirmed, as well as what we're hearing from the sheriff here, that everybody is okay. So good news there. Exactly the details of where they were going or the purpose, we're not sure of all of that yet. But the biggest thing, when you see smoke like that and you see this many emergency responding crews, obviously you want to, hearing that everyone's okay is important. Looking at this here, you can see this is a picture. If you can see it, I'm holding our phone up here. My photographer, Lynn, was able to get this shot as we were driving in. You can see that smoke's pretty heavy.
Yeah, exactly. And now as we look, it looks as though it is almost out. That fire, the smoke has now turned white, which is always a great sign. It means they're really getting a handle on things. But as the smoke begins to clear, you have some sense of the magnitude of that crash. Bree, while you're out there with all those emergency workers and the like, have you seen anybody in any of the ambulances, or at this point, do you know if any of the passengers are still around that area?
This is just speculation, Melanie. We haven't seen anybody come back down this roadway, minus a couple of these police cars like you see right here coming up to us. It looks like they're Waller County constables. You can see they're talking to the crew here. But we have seen a number of those large EMS trucks head back. So speculating, we haven't had this confirmed from anyone, would imagine there might be still some people here. Obviously, we responded to this very quickly once we got the news. I would imagine there could be somebody still back there, since they are still sending those EMS trucks back to help. But we have not seen them come back. So if anybody is still over there, hopefully, just speculating, it could be minor, since they're not rushing anybody down this way. But, we're still waiting to have any of that confirmed. We're a distance away, can't really hear any of the details. And, emergency crews have been so busy, we're, not going to stop them in the middle of trying to figure all of this out. But, some more people walking up who have heard it or see the smoke, who, work in this area. It's still pretty rural, but there's a number of businesses. I think a lot of people concerned. We have some people walking up now to the crews just asking, hey, what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely, especially when you see all those flashing lights there on that fairly remote road. Which, by the way, as you were coming in, is there any, neighborhood close by, any office buildings, anything like that?
So I did see a number of office buildings. Of course, there is the Jet Center, that's just down the road here, and a couple different smaller aviation bunkers. And you can see fire crews here now showing up. They have their sirens on all the way down to this little crossing here. This is Fort Bend hazmat response, and you can see the fire marshal also showing up. But in response to your question, I did see, at least once you get off the highway, it's pretty rural, but I would say 20 to 30 spread out businesses. Mostly looks like they could be like mechanical type businesses, or a couple warehouses that are all isolated in their own property. And then where we're standing at here, once you pull up past the planes, really just fields and fences here. So on this side of it, I would say nothing really from where we can see, no businesses. But as you come off the highway and enter this area, yeah, there were a number of them. And that's where I was saying, I was seeing a ton of people standing outside looking in this direction, trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Bree, we're going to break away from you. If you would, if you get a moment, can you kind of look around and see if you see any trees that may have been knocked over, or fences or power poles? It looks as though this plane never really got off the ground, but if you are able to sort of identify that, we will come back to you. We're going to take a quick break for right now as we continue to look live at this scene out in Waller County, where there was a plane crash. 22 people, we are told, on board. Only one hurt, back injuries at this point. So we're going to ask Tammy Rose and her pilot to stand by, and Bree, and we will be right back. off from the airport and apparently never really got very high above the ground at all, judging from not only the tire track marks that you can see there at the end of the runway, but also later on you can actually see the tops of some trees and fences torn off or knocked over completely as we continue to look here at the sign. Now, here are a whole lot of emergency vehicles, which of course made that scene almost immediately after hearing that a good-sized plane had gone down there. Ted Oberg has been standing by with us this entire time, kind of watching the unfolding of this story. And by the way, Ted, as we look at that plane, it looks as though the flames are all but out at this point. Just a little bit of white smoke
and
there.
Just to let you know,
and it is incredible as you look at what is left of that plane, which is virtually nothing.
Virtually nothing, no.
It's incredible that people were able to walk out of there without any more serious injuries than what we are hearing at this point. But if you can kind of reconstruct for us what you think happened, you have a pretty good handle on how these crashes look, so if you would.
Well, and Jerry, if we could in the control room run that video, or there's the end of the runway, and I think you can get a sense of how close this plane is to the runway. And we were talking about what our SkyEye pilot believes is an aborted takeoff. On the right, that's live video. On the left, you can see tape. As that runway ends, you can see tire tracks. There'd be no other reason for tire tracks to be in that grass there. Look at that pair of tracks as it crosses the drainage ditches and so forth, gets to that berm, and then there you can start to see where the brush gets thicker and the tire tracks continue. There are some trees down there, power lines down there, a little bit of flame there in that grove of trees. Likely the plane made a first impact there, spun around and landed here. You can see that giant divot behind the plane, and then just virtually nothing left with the exception of the tail section of that plane. Again, on the left, that is tape video from before. On the right, that's the fire at this point right now. But we do believe that part of the reason that fire lasted so long is because there was a complete load of fuel on this plane, a DC-9, if you're familiar with that aircraft. Thinking about all of those people on board, the 21 people on board, this is not a low plane necessarily to the ground. It's not a 747. It's not 2 stories above the ground, but it's not something you can just simply hop up out of, Melanie. It would have taken some sort of emergency exit. If you look at the center point outage tracker, we know that the power lines were hit. And now we know that as many as 1,500 people are without power in that area because of it. It is a rural area, but certainly there aren't an awful lot of homes within a few miles of this small airport. All of those people without power because of the power lines that this plane hit as it was trying to stop this takeoff. And there could be several reasons for that. We don't know why. What we do know about the people on board is only that the owner of the plane himself was on board, a man by the name of J. Allen Kent, whose website suggests he is a custom home builder from the Spring, North Houston area, who's been in business for quite some time. His company is the registered the plane traces back to him and as the owner of this plane. It's a 34-year-old plane as aircraft go. Starting to get old, but certainly not so old that it would be an immediate concern. Planes fly that age all the time.
And Ted, as we are looking here for the first time, without the hindrance of flames and smoke, we can actually see the tail of that plane and we can see inside. And something you noted a little while ago, the left engine is almost completely charred. The right engine almost looks untouched there. But it's the first time we are able to see inside the tail of that plane and realize just how incredible it is that all those people were able to get out.
It is, and there you can see those 2 engines pretty clearly. The one on the right, not even the paint is charred there.
Exactly.
Absolutely nothing. It would likely indicate there was little fuel there. Otherwise, fuel would have burned. But as you pull out, you can both get a sense of how little is left of this plane, Mel. But also how thankful we should be that this happened where it did. even at any of our other airports in town, there would have been homes and businesses that close by.
Yeah, Bree mentioned just a moment ago, Bree Berry is there at the scene, and we may be able to talk to her again in just a couple of minutes. But she mentioned that she only saw a handful of businesses as they headed out that way. She said maybe 15 or so, primarily smaller businesses. So the real blessing here is that this really was a remote area and you didn't have a lot of people who might be affected. I'm surprised, Ted, and you probably have a better handle on this, but surprised that such a large plane would use such a small airport.
Well, if you take a look at this runway, Mel, this is not a short runway. I mean, as you look at some of the smaller regional airports that people use for, this is not a short runway by any stretch. Once we're able to leave those two, I mean, you can see how long this is. And Tammy, I don't know if you have a sense of how long that runway is, but it's not.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good stretch. You know, I don't think it's necessarily uncommon. One of the things that airport operator brags about is that it has the largest undercover space in the world to unload your plane, which would suggest that they're interested in not just a two-seater Cessna, but that they can handle larger business jets.
Yeah, and Tammy, if you are still available there, can you kind of tell us what you are seeing now that the fire is out?
Yeah, so basically my pilot, Dave Allen, pointed out a few things. You were talking about how long this is. It's 6,600 feet, more than a mile,
Wow.
so plenty of room for it to get off the ground. And again, my pilot, who also worked for the airlines, Mesa Airlines, has some, familiarity with flying these, noticed right away that there was definitely some skid marks there, and what he said was an aborted takeoff. So something went wrong as they were trying to take off, probably hit the brakes there, wasn't able to stop the aircraft, and that's where you see the skid lines and it hitting that fence line and the power lines and then ending up where it did. So when we first lifted off, we could actually see this smoke from Sugar Land about 20 miles away. So it was a huge fireball when we first got here on scene, and now the good news, it looks like they pretty much have a handle on it, just a little bit of white smoke on the left-hand side.
And it looks as though a lot of the firefighters have even stepped away. You still have a handful that are putting foam and water. I imagine, given all the heavy equipment and apparel they have to wear, that they are trying to use them for a few minutes and then let them get a break. But at this point, we are seeing far fewer firefighters going at it as we did just even a few moments ago. And we get a real sense now as we look at it from this angle, Tammy, just how destroyed that plane was, that there is virtually nothing left of the front part of the plane at all. That is completely charred and gone.
Well, if it was taking off, obviously it was full of fuel, and that's why you had so many flames and stuff. It was heavily set. It wasn't like it was just landing and didn't have a lot of fuel. That's why, there was so much to burn there, because more than likely you take off, with a full load of gas. And then, I've covered so many of these airplane crashes, and just amazing to hear 21 people walking away after seeing this. It is just amazing. The pilot obviously did a pretty good job into, getting it to stop there in the grassy area. We were estimating, probably another 1,000 feet from where they were taking off. And again, this airport, the runway is a little bit more than a mile, 6,600 square feet. So this isn't a small, takeoff area. So, not sure exactly what went wrong, but more than likely had to abort the takeoff, hit the brakes, and unfortunately was unable to stop.
Yeah, and we can see the results of that with those long skid marks there. We can also see on our left-hand side, and you're looking at live pictures from the ground, our crew there, you can see some of the emergency vehicles beginning to either move out or sort of rearrange themselves. We're hearing that most of the passengers were just fine. I would imagine they've all been checked out at the scene, except for one person who was injured, and we're hearing a back injury, and had to be taken to a nearby hospital. Bree Berry is at that location, and we want to go back down on the ground to Bree and her photographer there. Bree, I understand you had a chance to talk to somebody who may have seen this all happen?
Mel, so first off, I want to respond to the question you asked me when we were on air. You asked if there had been any power lines or anything like that. Now, we don't from our vantage point. I'll turn here so you can see, we're down this gravel road. We can't exactly see where that crash is. I know you guys have a better look with SkyEye, but we were told that it is possible when it crossed onto Morton Road from the runway, it could have taken out a power line. At least that's what the crew who is here working thinks could have happened, because power did go out along this area, and down where we're at, I got a better idea of a sense of where we're standing. So we have a number of businesses here, but there's also the Waller County Recycling Center that down the road, and apparently they lost power when this incident happened. So it is possible, but you and Ted were mentioning it's not a very populated area, so that's good news there as far as anyone else who was affected by this. And looking at this plane, when we're seeing some images of it, it's a pretty large size plane, so it makes sense why people could see the smoke all the way down 6 and I-10. Seeing that now, it's clear, obviously, but let me give you an idea of what we have going on the ground here. So, we watched a number of those first responder vehicles exit the area. Of course, there's still a ton down there working this scene, making sure that fire's put out, but we saw a majority of the EMS and ambulance vehicles leave. None of them were speeding out of here, so that's potentially some good news that either all of the passengers who needed to be removed from the scene are now gone, or if they did have anybody, it's very minor because they all sort of just drove out here in a single file line. But we did, as you said, get a chance to talk to some of the people who were out here, and the people who were out here were crew members actually repairing this road back here. And we spoke with one, Chelsea. She said that she couldn't see it exactly. She did see the flames and the aftermath, but she said that explosion was something not only that she saw, something that she immediately smelled, but also something she could feel.
I was sitting here and I saw in the rearview mirror, I just saw it go boom, and it was a big orange explosion.
Did you immediately think it was a plane? Or?
I didn't think it was a plane. I just kind of saw the explosion. I didn't really see the plane go down.
So I guess it was a good sized plane. There was 22 people on board.
Correct.
But luckily no one is
hurt. Everybody's fine.
I mean, does that kind of surprise you with the amount of the explosion?
Yeah. We were thinking that nobody was going to walk away from that. So that's a miracle.
So, listening to her, she was saying that she was just pretty stunned that everybody walked away, but all the crew here is really thankful for that, because they all told me once they saw that massive explosion, once they felt it, immediately smelled a burning smell in the air is the way she described it. They said they were really stunned to find out everybody was able to safely get off that plane, or at least are okay. And something else, that when we came down here, they were over here directing traffic, letting us know where to park. They're kind of standing here just hanging out, but they've now turned in from a road crew who was helping fix this area to helping first responders get where they need to be, making sure, people avoid this area, telling them where to go. They told us where we needed to be so that we were safely put, and that was something they sort of just took on their own. So, it is a testament that when there is a problem, when there is an incident like this, you can find the helpers, and certainly there are some of those people here. So from where we're standing, we're not smelling any more of that smoke. It seems to have gone completely down from this direction, and a lot of those first responder crews have left the area, so all really a good sign in this situation. Melanie?
Yeah, absolutely. As that woman said, it is a miracle. It did not look like anybody would be able to walk away, much less all of them. So, Bree, thank you so much for bringing us that eyewitness. I believe we've also got some video right now. And Ted, you may want to take a look at this as well.
Yeah.
But video of the plane taking off. Now, we don't see it come down, but this is it taking off. You can see it's moving it
and it's hard to tell, Mel, if it's at the end of the runway, if it was using all of the runway that it needed. But there it is. You can see it starting to roll. Yeah, you see it picking
up speed there, yeah. And at this point, you would expect it to begin to take off.
The nose still on the ground there, the nose still on the ground there. We're going to lose sight of it behind a building here in a second, but the nose never leaves the runway.
Never comes up the ground, comes up off the ground. And there you see it really moving at a pretty good clip, but again, it does not, we cannot see the nose go up. So this, at least someone was taking this picture as it took off. I'm sure, you know, curious about the size of the plane, what plane it was. But you can see it there moving along, picking up speed. And again, you would expect it to lift at this point. It does not. And then it disappears in just a second behind a building there. You can see other planes as well to give you some sense of it. And there it goes, moving at a pretty good clip at that point.
We also don't see it lurch forward as if the pilot had recognized immediately that something was wrong and they were putting the brakes on. At least through that, in the entirety of that video, it appears to be trying to take off.
Yeah.
But according to our pilot in SkyEye, he suggests that it may have been an aborted takeoff, just based on what the skid marks at the end of the runway and the fact that this plane never makes it airborne, because we see the tire tracks all the way to the crash site.
Yeah, we literally do, as though it never even got even a few feet above the ground. And the fact that it took down that fence, Ted, that we saw that maybe 8 to 10 foot, yeah, as well as some of those power lines. Again, that indicates it did not get very far and certainly did not get off the ground by much, if at all. As we continue to watch that, just to kind of update people, we are talking about this plane crash in Waller County. It's close to Morton Road there, but also very, very close to the Houston Executive Airport. That's the runway we are looking at. You can see at this point some of those deep ruts in the ground we are presuming from the plane's wheels, since it does not look as though it ever got off the ground. 21 people on board. We now have a solid number there. Only one injured with back injuries. And the owner of that plane also on board, J. Allen Kent, who heads up Flair Builders. He was on the plane, and we don't know if he was the person who was hurt or one of the lucky 20 who walked away, but we are certainly trying to find out a lot more about that. What we do know at this point is that the fire is virtually out, but as SkyEye sort of zooms in once again on the end of the runway and shows us those tire tracks there from the plane, as well as just that long line right now of emergency vehicles. Some have already left, as Bree says, but for the most part, you've still got a sizable crowd of vehicles out there, people kind of wrapping up the investigation.
Well, and it's likely now, Mel, that what will happen is as the fire crews wrap up their work, and thankfully there are no serious injuries or people that still need to be treated on scene, those emergency crews will start to dissipate and clear the scene so that NTSB investigators, who no doubt are already on the way to the site of this plane crash, can come here, and then they will start to gather photographs, physical evidence. The wheel is separated by about 50 to 100 yards. They'll gather all of that debris there in that tree line and then take what they can. Obviously, those two engines will leave this scene and be studied quite extensively by the engine manufacturers and by investigators from the NTSB, because this is a very serious size jet. The NTSB investigates every plane crash, but certainly one of this size they'll take their time with, and there will be a very extensive investigation, both of the pilot's behavior on board this plane, the co-pilot's behavior, what they did, how the plane reacted, and whatever they can find. Those typically take months, so we may not get answers anytime soon as to the true reason of this crash.
Yeah.
But certainly the next step will be for NTSB investigators from across the country to come and take a look at all of this.
And amazingly, much of it may be preserved in the tail of that plane, which is one of the few large pieces of the fuselage that actually survived there. As you pointed out before, Ted, left engine charred, and the right engine almost untouched for some reason. We don't know what that will mean in terms of what happened with the plane, but certainly an interesting observation. We're seeing more water being put on the plane. That may be more precautionary at this point, because for the most part, it looks as though the blaze is pretty much out. And as we heard from that eyewitness, what she saw was a big explosion in her rear view mirror. Didn't hear a whole lot, but then all of a sudden, boom, which I guess indicates that the plane did not crash, that perhaps it never left the ground, or otherwise you would expect that people might have heard it coming down.
And just look at how little is left. No seats, little of the aluminum that wrapped the aircraft. The entire top is gone. The only metal that may be left of the fuselage of that plane is what was on the ground itself, but it doesn't look like there's a whole lot there.
Yeah.
Virtually none of the wings. I didn't see anywhere where they may have come off as this plane was careening across that grass field. So typically you'd expect to see some wings there. Maybe that's where that firefighter on the right is climbing over one. But oh, and I guess there's another, the right wing there is there on the ground. But
Yeah,
look on the left side of the plane, virtually none. Not terribly surprising, as that's where the fuel tanks are on the jet like this. But gosh, I mean,
well, it was just
nothing left.
Yeah, it was just simply consumed, the entire plane, by that huge explosion and all of that fire. We've been watching them put it out for well over an hour now, Ted. So not surprisingly that there is very little left, but that really is just a shell, just you know, barely enough debris to really comb through at this point. But we know
and
they
none
will
of the
be.
cockpit, Mel.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing there. So what an amazing miracle that everybody was able to get away from there. Pooja Lodia is standing by live right now. And Pooja, are you near the scene, or are you on the opposite side from Bree? Okay, we may not have a mic for Pooja just yet.
Well,
Oh, there you go. Go ahead. Sorry about
that better, Melanie? Can you hear me now? Great. So we're right at Morton Road and FM 2855. And if you look all the way down Morton Road, you can see just how many emergency vehicles are out here. I can tell you, just driving in to get here, we saw several emergency vehicles coming and going from this area. It is a pretty rural area, and we're told that that crash actually happened here in this field. So you can see there really aren't any businesses out here. There's really nothing but trees and fields out here. This is in Waller County, and you can see right here, actually, there's a podium set up because we are told that we are going to be getting some more information, more updates within the next couple of minutes.
All right, Pooja, thank you very much. Yeah, I see it set up there. So from where you're standing, how much can you see other than the fact that there's very little around there?
Well, we can't actually see the crash from where we're standing, but really the emergency units out here is what you notice. You can see there's one coming here and toward us, but I mean, just all in this area. There are so many of these emergency units responding to this scene, trying to help out, because again, I mean, we're talking about 22 people here. We're talking about a big plane crash in an area where there's really not very much. So agencies are coming from all over to help out with this.
Yeah, and we can continue to see from SkyEye right now, Pooja, not only the firefighters who are left, still trying to put out the last of those flames, but we have a really good shot for the first time of the front of the plane, Ted. I don't know if you saw that. Tammy, if you guys could kind of pan back to the front of the plane, which we have not really been able to see. But yeah, Ted, there you go. That is
Sure, you see the door lying on the ground there?
I did, absolutely.
And the cockpit there. Now, it's hard to imagine the pilots coming out of this unscathed as well. When you see that, the force they must have had as this plane came to a stop must have been pretty severe as well. It's also hard to tell from these pictures where the 21 people got out of this plane.
Yeah.
Before it was consumed by fire, that door would have been, unless it landed nose down, it would have been a bit in the air. It's possible that the tail broke off and they were able to get out of a broken plane, but there would have been wires, and at that point, jet fuel and fire likely starting pretty quickly. Once we were able to hear from eyewitnesses and people who were on this plane, it is going to be a harrowing, harrowing tale.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine what was going through their minds as they were trying to get out of there. But as you look at that just burned out shell, as you say, Ted, it's incredible that the pilots were able to get out, much less everyone else. We're hearing now, our producer Jerry just informed me, they were headed to Boston for Game 4 of the series against the Astros. So this was a plane full of folks, no doubt celebrating the idea that they were going out of town to a huge game like that, the ALCS. And this is how their trip ended, you know, began and ended all at the same time. But yeah, as you look there at the cockpit and at the front of the plane, it is amazing that anyone was able to get out of there, much less everyone.
And again, the only person who we know that was on board, for those of you who are just joining us, is the owner of the company Flare Builders. His name is J. Allen Kent, the president and CEO of that company, which is also the owner of the plane as well. Planes are typically owned by their own companies, and this is owned by a company out of Spring that also traces back to Mr. Kent. He was on board. His company says he is okay, but that was the only information that they released about him. And now we know that they were on their way to the ALCS.
Yeah, exactly. As we look at all of that white smoke pouring out of what's left of the plane, and that's the tail, that's really the only thing that is intact at this point. And you can see those engines very different in terms of what happened to them. One charred, the other one pretty much intact. But again, this is the only really recognizable part of this plane at this point, and that is the tail of that McDonnell Douglas model plane. Now, as Ted was telling us just a little while ago, this plane, when used in commercial flight, can hold at least 170 people. This would be the approximate size of, say, a Southwest flight for the most part. But here it had been reconfigured so that it was considered to be a VIP plane, meaning you probably had lots of luxury seats there, but not nearly as many packed into there as normal. But good sized plane. Most of us have ridden on a model like this or something very similar. 34 years old, I think we were told, Ted.
Just under 34 years old. There are hundreds of this type of plane still in commercial service across the world. Not many used probably in flights that most people take. Southwest doesn't fly this. I don't believe United has any of these anymore. But this is a plane that is still used in commercial aviation and still bought and sold in the private jet business as well. We're just getting now, Melanie, some interesting traffic from emergency operators as they were getting calls about this plane. And so a couple minutes after they get the first call, eight minutes after they get the first call, radio traffic suggests this plane was fully engulfed. That gives you a sense of how fast this all unfolded and how quickly people had to get off this plane. No time to look for your carry-ons or check behind you for lost stuff, man. Get off the plane. We're hearing word that, Melanie, emergency officials are about to brief us there at the site of this plane crash, and hopefully they'll have some answers, although at this point they probably don't have entirely the full story there.
Yeah, and we can see some of those officers beginning to gather there. A little bit of information that is coming in. We saw that video just a short time ago. Now, the man who shot that video was kind enough to share it with us. Doesn't particularly want to be identified, though, as well. And it appears as though, there you see the video there on your left-hand side of that plane taking off. And notice that the wheels never left the ground. You do not see the nose coming up. And as Ted has been pointing out, we can see the tire tracks. Let's go to Pooja. She is standing by for that press conference. Pooja?
Well, Melanie, you can see a lot of officials have just come out here. They say a press conference is about to start in about 15 minutes. But before I get to that, I just wanted to let you know that just a few moments ago, I did manage to get the owner of the plane on the phone. His name is Alan Kent. He told me that he is right now with all of the passengers who were on that plane. He says right now everything is okay. Nobody is seriously hurt. But of course, he sounded very kind of frantic, trying to figure out more details about what had happened. He told me that this was a group of people actually headed to the Astros game in Boston. This was a group of friends, people who were hanging out, just trying to have a good time to go to that Astros game. And of course, they are all now here, luckily not seriously injured, but this is, of course, still a really concerning situation for that owner. Again, he sounded a little frantic. He was trying to get more information. He said he was waiting for a phone call from the FAA. And we are, of course, also trying to get more information out here. This press conference here starting in just a few minutes.
When you had a chance to talk to him, Pooja, did he describe what happened?
He really couldn't describe much. I asked him if he was on the plane, and he said he had to go. There was a lot of commotion around him, but again, he did say that he knew everybody who was on this plane. It was a group of friends.
And everybody was okay. Just unbelievable that so many people walked away. Well, we can see some of the officials gathering behind you. At this point, do we know if someone from, say, the NTSB is here or anything like that, or are these primarily Waller County officials?
We are not sure right now. I mostly see Waller County officials. I do see the fire marshal over there. I see a couple of DPS troopers, and they did tell us that they are waiting for more officials to head over here. We are hoping for officials from the FAA, maybe the NTSB, anybody who can give us a lot more information about what exactly happened on that plane.
Now, Pooja, I actually see a lot of traffic behind you, which is surprising because up till now we haven't seen much. Have they opened up the roads, and what is that major road behind you?
So this road here behind me is FM 2855. This road, when I got here about 30 minutes ago, was open, but there have been kind of numerous backups due to all of the emergency vehicles. So as soon as, you know, one of the ambulances or one of the hazmat trucks moves, we do see kind of a big rush of traffic coming in. But again, we are still seeing more officials even arrive here to scene. That's Waller County Road and Rescue. We see other official-looking vehicles as well as just residents out here.
Now, when you had a chance to talk to Mr. Kent, did he indicate whether or not the other passengers were with him and where they may have ended up?
He didn't say where the passengers were, but he did say that he was with all of them right now, which is why he felt confident in saying that nobody was seriously injured.
Yeah, just an incredible story. And hopefully you will reach out to him again, and perhaps we'll get a chance to hear his firsthand account of everything. Well, we will continue to just stand by here, Pooja, and wait on the press conference to start. I do want to talk a little bit about power outages. The plane did take out a center point overhead power line, and that caused an outage, they say, for at least 1,800 customers in the area. That happened about 10 a.m. They say they have responded promptly. They were able to redirect power and restore service to everybody almost, except for about 15 or 17 customers. They continue on site, continuing to make repairs to those lines, but we clearly saw that the plane took out at least one or two overhead lines there.
Yeah, right there at the end of the runway, we know, because the plane never left the ground, took out a fence, and then it took out that power line right there at the end of the runway. So.
Absolutely, Ted, absolutely. Before the press conference starts, and I believe Pooja said we've got another 10 minutes or so, we want to go back to Bree Berry, who is also on that location. Bree, tell me where you are, let's say, respective to the plane and to Pooja.
Sure. So imagine it almost like a perfect square. Pooja is on one corner, I'm diagonal from her, and the plane is just down this road here. So we're off the cross of Morton Road.
Bree, we're going to have to break away. Let's go to the press conference right now.
The fire chief and a wealth of others. Today, I would like to start off by saying this is a good day. This is actually a day of celebration for a lot of people. So let me explain. Today, the Texas Department of Public Safety, the Waller County Sheriff's Office, and Waller Harris ESD 20 was called out to a scene of a plane crash right here in Waller County at FM 2855 in Morton. Once we arrived on scene, of course, we observed the plane in its state engulfed, and we were advised that, of course, all individuals on board the plane, all 18 passengers and 13 crew members survived. At this time, we're getting reports that 2 individuals were transported to the hospital for their injuries, and this plane was actually attempted to take off, but in a rolling state right here at the Houston Executive Airport here in Waller County, and never was able to take flight. The actual airplane rolled down the runway, struck an actual fence, and from there became disabled. Luckily, and we're thankful that all of the passengers and crew members were able to extract themselves, and that's when the first responders came in to go to work to extinguish the fire. So again, today is a good day for all, not only for the passengers and crew, but for this community and first responders. We do know that the plane was headed to Boston, leaving this airport, headed to Boston, and that's the information that we have at this time. We're not sure really why it caught on fire. Not sure if it was because it hit the structure, but we are waiting on the FAA, and they're going to be able to give us more information on the particulars of the actual crash. I would like to bring in our emergency management officials so they can speak onto the extinguishing of the fire. Boston. Possibly, I'm not sure. 18 passengers aboard, 3 crew members to include 2 pilots and, of course, one attendee. The youngest child that we reported is 10 years old.
Can you walk us through how the passengers were able to extract themselves out of the plane?
We don't know that at this time, but of course, again, however they extracted themselves, they're off, and no one's deceased. And man, that is an awesome feeling right now for us as first responders.
Again, Sergeant Wilder, thank you for you and your team for being here today in Waller County. What I want to do as the Waller County Emergency Management Coordinator, I want to thank all the responding agencies that came to our aid. Waller County is a very rural community, but we have a lot of partners that surround us. As you can see, we have Harris County, we have Fort Bend County, we have a number of fire departments in the area who have assisted us. Again, it's a blessing today that all passengers were out of the plane, and just very minor injuries that was stated before. Just lower back pain and some respiratory issues. So again, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Tim Gibson. He's the chief of the responding fire department that's handling this incident.
I'm Tim Gibson, Director of Waller Harris Emergency Services District 200. We're the provider out here for fire and EMS services across all of Waller County and part of Harris County. We have multiple service providers out here today. We actually did have multiple of our crew members in our fire departments that were responding that are also aircraft rescue firefighters and certified. They were able to get on scene, make a good assessment quickly. We did find that all passengers had self-extricated.
Hello, everybody.
We assisted
Melanie
them from the
Lawson
field
here,
where the plane
and we are
ended up
interrupting regular
on the north side of Morton Road from the airport. And we were able
Melanie
to
Lawson
get,
here, and we are interrupting your regular programming to update you on a plane crash in Waller County. We're actually listening to a press conference at this point. Plane crash while trying to take off from the Houston Executive Airport in Waller County. 21 people on board, we're now learning, including a 10-year-old child. Everyone walked away. Let's listen in.
They were stunned. They were very, very stunned, but they did all self-extricate. We can't tell you how they did that or in what method. And the plane was fully involved when we arrived.
And just describe the area where the plane came to land. And for those passengers getting out, is it easy to walk around?
So there is a gravel driveway that goes out into that pasture, but it is very dense brush and pasture area out there where the plane ended up and came to rest.
Give us an idea of how surprising it is, how nobody here was killed or any minor injuries. Is that what y'all expected when you arrived?
You know, ma'am, anytime you have a plane that doesn't make a landing on the runway like it should, we're always expecting the worst but hoping for the best. And today, we absolutely positively got the best outcome we could hope for on this incident.
So was the plane in one piece when it landed?
I couldn't tell you that right now, ma'am. No, ma'am.
When it broke apart?
I couldn't tell you that right now either.
But, sir, it never took off, right?
It was attempting a takeoff.
But did it go up?
Yep. I do not believe so.
Did not.
Has the pilot explained what happened or what caused him not to take off?
That's going to be coordinated between DPS, and I'll let them answer that.
Thank you so much.
Sir.
Right now, again, we're waiting on the FAA, and they're going to look at the particulars of that. Again, what I can tell you is the plane traveled approximately 500 feet on the runway, and then that's when the actual incident ensued. So once the FAA arrives on scene, they'll be able to kind of tie this up and give us more particulars with their investigation. But at this time, that's all that we have. Again, I think we can all agree, we can celebrate on today that no one was killed in this horrific incident.
The 2 people that were transported, can you describe their injuries as to why they were transported to the
No, sir, I don't have any details on the injuries.
So where are the passengers now?
Anybody?
Are they still by the plane? Where are they?
Okay, all back at the airport. All back at the airport, safe and sound. Thank you, guys.
Do you have a Spanish speaker for us?
I do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hola, me llamo Trooper Miguel Tejeda.
All right, we have been listening there to Waller County officials talking about this plane crash. And as we heard right in the beginning, they said, this is a good day, we can celebrate. They expected, after hearing about this plane crash, they expected to arrive and see people not survive this, clearly with a fire blazing away at that point. And instead, all of the passengers are fine. We are hearing perhaps Pooja, let me just ask, perhaps 2 people injured instead of 1, but again, 21 is the number?
Right. Right. We were told 21 people total, and 2 people were taken to the hospital. They didn't describe too much in detail on those exact injuries, but said that they were lower back pain as well as respiratory issues. Really just saying over and over again that these were not serious injuries at all. They were taken to the hospital as a precaution.
Well, and clearly, as we look at what's left of that plane, it is just absolutely miraculous that everybody was able to walk away. But we're learning a little bit more about where the plane was going. I know you had a chance to talk to the owner of the plane, who was also on board, and we know a little bit more that they were headed off for a good time.
Right, they were headed off to an Astros game. That is according to the owner. The officials out here did say that that plane was on its way to Boston. And again, you can see that that is still going on right now as we speak, because there are Spanish-speaking reporters out here, and of course for that Spanish audience. But one of the things, Melanie, that really struck me about this press briefing is that they told us that this plane never even took off. It went about 500 feet on the runway, and that is when this happened. We don't know at this point how anybody inside was able to get out. All they would tell us out here is that they were able to get out by themselves. And we're talking about one passenger as young as 10 years old. So we don't know exactly when that fire started, how it started, and how the plane really kind of broke in half.
Yeah, no, it's incredible when you look at those pictures and you realize the entire thing disintegrated with the exception of the tail. Pooja, thank you so much. Certainly, if you get a chance to reach out to the owner, if you will let us know. In fact, if you would, just real quickly, you had a chance to catch him on the phone. What did he say, and did he give you any indication about what happened?
I spoke to him very briefly. I don't know at this point whether he was on the plane or not, but I can tell you that he said he was with all of the passengers. We now know that those passengers are at the Houston Executive Airport and all doing okay. But that owner sounded distraught. He sounded frantic. He told me that this was a group of friends, families, people who knew each other, who were all going to Boston to go see that Astros game. So this was really supposed to be a fun trip. Again, we heard that one of the people there was only 10 years old. So families, fun, just going on a great trip to go watch a baseball game, and look what happened out here. Of course, the good news is that nobody is hurt, but I am hoping to speak to that owner again and maybe get a few more details.
Yeah, that would be wonderful, and to hear just how they were able to get out, which clearly even floored the officers out there. We do know his name is J. Allen Kent. He is the owner of Flair Builders. And thank you so much, Pooja, for being there and for updating us throughout this morning. As we say, this was a situation where the plane attempted to take off, and I don't know if we still have that video that someone shot of the plane taking off, if we're able to show that at this point. But if not, the plane attempted to take off, and as we heard from officials there, Ted, there you go, there is the shot on your right-hand side. The nose never lifted. It never left the ground, to the best of our knowledge here. It went 500 feet down the runway, never lifted off at that point, and then you can clearly see the tire tracks in the grass as it traveled along.
This DC-9 MD-87, 34 years old, is a plane that needs a fair amount of runway to take off, and what you see here in this video is the beginning of that process. We don't know if the pilot had gone to the end of the runway to use every available foot there, but you can see, at least in the first 25 seconds of this attempted takeoff, none of the 3 sets of wheels there ever leave the ground. And then this second piece of video that we shot from SkyEye is really, I think, the key piece to understand what happened after this takeoff video. And what you'll see here in just a second is the end of the runway. You'll look at the white stripes that are typically on the end of that runway, and you'll see skid marks, likely from a plane trying to brake as it is leaving the end of the runway. There you see tire tracks at the end of that runway, indicating the plane still likely on the ground at this point as it goes across that drainage ditch, across that road, and hits that dirt berm there. You can see all of that disturbed vegetation there. Then those trees catch fire as this plane continues. If it's not off the ground, it's on the ground still with its wheels touching. It skids around there, and almost a half circle where it catches fire and rests there. The fire remained, Melanie, for about an hour. This is prior video, the fire now out there at the scene in Waller County. But this, a loop now of the video of the end of the runway where you see the skid marks and then the tire tracks in that dirt as this plane tries to stop, knowing that this is a very dangerous situation in those moments, trying to get this very heavy, very large aircraft to stop as it's careening across the grass, that road, and then into the trees where it eventually rested.
Yeah, another saving grace is that this is such a rural area, fairly remote, and nothing close to this scene, which was the real blessing here. Well, again, just to sort of wrap up here, a plane crash in Waller County. We now know 18 passengers, 3 crew members. One of the passengers was a child, only 10 years old. We do know now 2 people have been taken to the hospital, we understand, with relatively minor injuries. And as you heard there, the owner was on board, Alan Kent, owner of Flair Builders here. But just an incredible end to this story, which could have gone so much worse. They were headed to Boston, by the way. Don't know if I said that once again, but traveled about 500 feet on that runway. We're going to stay on top of this. Obviously, a lot of angles to this story, and we have yet to hear from any of the people on board. We did hear from one eyewitness who said she was in her truck and suddenly there was this loud explosion right behind her. She did not see the plane come down, we now believe, because the plane never left the ground.
She likely never would have seen it from where she was.
Exactly.
A couple hundred yards away, you would not have seen a plane hidden by those trees. The flames, that intense fire, Mel, because this plane was trying to take off, loaded with fuel.
Absolutely. So an explosion, but somewhere fairly quickly, people were able to get off that plane and get away from it, which is just incredible the more you think about it. So a true miracle today that we are all witnessing. We're going to stay on top of this story. We'll bring you the latest information just as soon as we have it. And of course, a full wrap up beginning at 3 o'clock. Thanks for being with us.
son cajas viejas de un sistema orbital, es difícil recuperar estos datos, también está la grabación de la cabina, lo que hablan los pilotos entre ellos, lo que les dijo la torre de control, que es otro de los testigos, que seguramente tendrán que observar cómo fue la circunstancia para que además de la policía de Kane, el condado de Waller, están pidiendo